I'm a feminist, but when another feminist saw that I hadn't shaved my legs and said, isn't it great to be free of that kind of patriarchal bullshit? I said, yeah, and didn't tell her I'd missed my appointment for a wax and had just made another one.
I'm a feminist, but when I meet an ultra-practical, handy woman, I often assume she's gay.
So okay for you to say that.
That's the only
reason.
I was still scared writing it down.
It's one of the main advantages of being a lesbian is that you can say that.
I can say that.
What are the other advantages?
I am quite handy. So it just works out.
I'm a feminist, but the main reason I don't wear stockings and suspenders every day is they're too difficult to do up. I mean, they're just inconvenient, but I do have sort of Mad Men fantasies of walking around with them under my dress. I think it would make me feel super sexy. But they're a faff. They're just a faff, and they don't stay around the back, and they're... Oh.
I don't think I've ever worn them.
Well...
I mean, there's still time.
Well, later this evening. I've got
Maybe
several pairs back at mine.
Have you? I'm a feminist, but when I meet an ultra-practical, handy woman and she's not gay, I'm often a bit disappointed. Not for any sex reason, just tribal.
Oh, I see that. I'm a feminist, but I was more upset about Bake Off leaving the BBC than I would be about Woman's Hour going to Dave. Live from King's Place in London, the Spontaneity Shop presents The Guilty Feminist with Deborah Frances-White and guest co-host Carrie Quinlan and special guests Reubs J Walsh, Rev Kate Harford and Leyla Hussein talking about minefields. This is The Guilty Feminist, the podcast in which we explore our noble goals as 21st century feminists and the hypocrisies and insecurities which undermine them. Guilty Feminists, have you had a wonderful Guilty Feminist week? Yes, great. Has your week been more guilty or more feminist? Just shout guilty or feminist. 1, 2, 3.
Guilty!
Literally one feminist.
A couple, there's one feminist somewhere in there going,
feminist? Oh no, I meant guilty. Guilty.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Carrie, have you had a Guilty Feminist week?
I've been camping.
Oh.
Which is both feminist and guilty.
Why? What's the guilty bit?
Couldn't always be bothered in the middle of the night to go to the camp toilet and weed in the forest.
I think peeing in the forest...
Which is also quite feminist. So don't oppress me with your toilets, patriarchy.
That's absolutely right. Tonight we're doing 2 episodes. One called Minefields.
I love you people.
And one called Faith. Oh, that
was a slightly different That's brilliant.
Now, both of these subjects are frankly terrifying. They are subjects where feminists massively disagree. There's lots of heated debate on the internet. And if you get... Minefields is, the things that you might get wrong, the things that you might say incorrectly, the things that might spark an argument or a fight. And if any of you engage in feminism on Twitter... It's a frightening place, and sometimes people get very angry. So we've assembled a panel that we're very excited about to really get into these subjects. I'm not sure I'm ready. I organised this episode months ago before I realised this day would come.
Oh, totally. You asked me if I'd co-host it about 5 months ago.
Yeah, literally.
And
I went, we'll put it 5 months in the future and that won't happen.
Yeah.
Now, I made that assumption because Trump had just got into the White House and I thought, we'll be all over by then.
Yeah, we'll be dead. We'll all be dead.
But when I get to feminist heaven, she will say, I see you've programmed in a very progressive, interesting and brave couple of shows here. Well done. Go to the top suite where Maya Angelou and Emmeline Pankhurst have just made you a bubble bath that you can have with all the other fun feminists who've just died also in the apocalypse.
See, I knew this day would come. From 5 months ago when you first asked me to do it, I knew this day would come. And so when you said, would you co-host a Guilty Feminist about minefields, I went, yeah, absolutely. And for the last 5 months, I've been going, what is wrong with you, mouth? Why?
It's true.
So it's been, interesting.
Yeah.
I got here early and I had a cup of tea upstairs, and I was gonna buy a chocolate bar, and they had lion bars, and I vaguely remember, although I may have got it mixed up with Yorkie. Now I say this, it was Yorkie. I'm really sorry, lion bar people. I didn't buy a lion bar because I got you mixed up with Yorkies.
Did you misgender a lion bar?
I misgendered a lion bar. I felt wrongly oppressed by a lion, and I rejected it out of hand when I've realised now it was Yorkie bars that...
Possibly it was maned, and you recognised that as a male symbol, and you... Like, if it had mane, it's a...
Yeah, that'll be it.
Probably. Do you want to introduce me? And I'll go to the mic.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that. Shall I do that?
Yeah.
Cool. Please welcome to the microphone, Deborah Frances-White!
So tonight, I want to talk about minefields. The reason we're doing this episode is because sometimes I find myself in the corner of dark bars and darker parts of the internet with other feminists going, but you're not allowed to say that. No, you shouldn't say that. Well, are we allowed to say that? I don't think we should say that. I don't know, but I'm not sure I feel that. Well, it doesn't matter if you feel it, just don't fucking say it. And I don't know how many feminists, women I've had who've said, I'll say this to you, but I wouldn't say it on your podcast. And it's not a terrible thing that they're saying. It's not an unempathetic thing that they're saying, but it's a nuance that is out of step with contemporary feminist thinking. I met somebody because she tweeted me about the show, and she said, the language that you've used is not correct. And I said, okay, well, could you be somebody who, if we use this kind of incorrect language about gender or sexuality, if you see it, could you please flag it up and tell us? Because I'm really happy to change language because I want this show to be as inclusive as possible. And so I started talking to this person, and we ended up going for a vegetarian lunch. It was a sort of a vegetarian, vegan lunch. It's the place where you assume you can meet people off the internet to talk about non-binary subjects. It's a safe space. It's a safe space. So this person is an academic. She's non-binary, and she is a Christian. And so in one person, I was able to have all of the conversations I'd ever wanted to have. Okay, so this is the kind of thing. This is the kind of minefield. Okay. When Transparent came out, Jeffrey Tambor was cast as the transgender father/mother of the family. It was written by a woman whose father came out as transgender, and so it was written from her experience, from the experience of the family. And I felt it was a very powerful programme because I felt what they'd done is they'd cast America's uncle, Jeffrey Tambor. We know him from other shows. We know him from Arrested Development. We know him from The Larry Sanders Show. And he's a sort of old manny type, avuncular. He's your dad, basically. He's America's dad. And I thought it was really important that they'd cast him. Do you know why? Because then I can relate to thinking, oh, what if my dad wanted to transition? I thought that was super important. Some people in the transgender community and the community of transgender allies felt very angry that Jeffrey Tambor had been cast because they said that role should have gone to a transgender woman. And the same about the Danish Girl with Eddie Redmayne. They said that role should have gone to a transgender woman. And the conversation I've had with other feminists who are extremely keen for transgender people to appear on the television as a matter of course went like this. Okay, but I do see that people are very angry about that, and it's not okay for me to say on Twitter, because I'm not transgender, it's not okay for me to say, but I feel that Jeffrey Tambor is America's dad, and that's the point of the show, then surely that's a good choice. And surely, if the Danish Girl's not going to get made without Eddie Redmayne, then it's important that a transgender story is being told. The fact that transgender stories are being told now is amazing. And that surely is the first step towards it being common to see transgender actors cast as transgender people and then transgender actors cast as cisgendered people. And Reubs said to me, yes, that's probably true. It's probably true that this is an important step in the evolution of transgender people appearing in the media more often and being cast in shows. But it's still okay for people to be angry about it now. And the fact that people are angry about it now is the only thing that will bring change tomorrow. Because I realised when she said that to me, I just went, oh yeah. If we all go, well done on casting Jeffrey Tambor, good choice, Jeffrey Tambor, we love Jeffrey Tambor. Awards, throw awards at Jeffrey Tambor. Well done, the transgender community is grateful and thanks you. Then what's Hollywood going to do? What are the TV networks going to do? They're going to go, well done us. Who else can we hire? Is Steve Martin working at the moment? They're not going to change. They're not going to change if that's easy box office and there's no cause for change. Now, Jeffrey Tambor recently said, I think in a speech where he did win one of the many awards that were thrown at him, he said it's time for transgender people to be allowed to play their own roles. He said that. So it was an exciting moment for me because Reubs and I got there in about, I would say, 6 chess moves. It was, what about this? But what about this? Well, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? Okay. And I went, I trust Reubs to have this conversation. I don't want to have any more of this conversation without it being recorded because basically I don't really enjoy conversations that aren't recorded. I just find it's a waste of time. I mean, often I'll be having a nice chat with a friend. I'll go, just in case, should we just pop the old iPhone? It doesn't take any time, does it? It doesn't hurt to record your conversations. I've got Alexa at home. I assume that MI5 are recording everything I say anyway. And if I ever needed the rushes, I could probably just write in and go, I had a fantastic conversation Wednesday afternoon at about 4:20 when a particularly interesting friend of mine came over and we ended up discussing the nuances of feminism and the queer movement before the First World War. Could I please have the tape? So I just thought, I want to have this conversation bravely and out loud, because this is the conversation I normally have in the corners of rooms in a whispered way going, but I feel like it's important that Jeffrey Tambor did that, and I think that was important. Is it okay to say it's not okay to say that because I'm not transgender and I should just go, yes, ally, amplify. But it doesn't, if I just say the right thing but I don't think the right thing because I haven't been taken through that process, or if there were 2 right things. And I know that's a really unusual thing to say now. But if there are 2 right things, if there are more than one way of thinking about this that is empathetic, that is whole, that is forward-moving, and if we need more than one way of thinking, if we need a pragmatic way of thinking and we need a radical way of thinking, if we need both of those things to get progress, then can we live together? Can we hold hands across the aisle and go, I'll do the bit we need to do now, which is hire Jeffrey Tambor. You do the shouty bit that says that's not good enough. And within 3 years to 5 years, it will be normal to see transgender people on the television playing cis roles. I feel tonight's episode is basically a dangerous space. That's what I feel. And I just sort of want to ask you, the audience, if you will go with us. Basically, could you get in my huddle? We had a guest huddle backstage where we all huddled up and said, it's okay to fuck up. We've always got the edit. Now, here's the thing, guys. We don't have the edit with you. So could I ask one thing, that if you tweet about tonight, you don't quote anybody. You don't go, ooh, well, Jane said exactly these words, because what she said might not be in the edit. And by Jane, I do mean Deborah, and by Deborah, I do mean me. There's no Jane. There's no Jane. I thought, they're going to go, but there's no Jane. And I'm going, oh, who are you talking about? Me. I'm going to bravely say stuff and we're going to share it together. We have a minefield buzzer on the table. Should we hit a minefield? Thank you. If we're not going to have challenges tonight, this show is the fucking challenge. So just, will you come with us? Yes. So if you could just, maybe we'll do some vows. We, the audience of the Guilty Feminist, do go into the dangerous space. Safely. Together. With love. Empathy. Sharing. Openness of heart and mind. And a fucking good sense of humour. Amen. Are women. Thank you. So, are you ready to meet our guests? Yes! Reubs Reubs Walsh is a social neuroscientist who specialises in gender expression at the Free University of Amsterdam. Our next guest is Rev Kate Harford, a minister at the Metropolitan Community Churches, and Leyla Hussein, who is a psychotherapist and anti-FGM activist, and also a smuggler of vulva cupcakes. Please welcome to the stage, Reubs, Kate and Leyla.
Hello.
Could I ask all of you just to introduce yourself with a personal minefield? So, Reubs, have you had a minefield situation where a minefield's gone off for you?
I've been doing some research into, well, as Deborah mentioned, I do stuff about gender identity and gender expression, and one of the really landmark findings in the field around trans people in particular is phantom genitals. So if you've heard of phantom limbs, you can probably work out what phantom genitals are. It's where you have an experience as if you had that organ, but you know it's not there, and it isn't. And so we put together some questionnaires and some implicit measures of different experiences and passed them out to people from, actually mostly in the UK, because it was with some collaborators in London. And questionnaires get written by, there's a trans ally validation questionnaire, which I find very annoying because it's basically a questionnaire for cis people to tell themselves how great they are.
I want to do it.
Do you get a badge?
No.
Do you get a cookie? That's what they give you on the internet if you ask for validation. They say, do you want a cookie? You
Yes.
think,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, we all like cookies. Sorry, fresh out. Anyway, so we passed these questionnaires around online, of course, and my collaborators, bless them, thought it would be really sensible, because I was the only trans-identifying person involved in the project, to put my name and contact details in case there was any problems. So I got lots of messages saying, this is doing me harm in these ways. And I am not entirely resolved as to how I feel about the whole thing. I think it's a bit like there might be two right things, because on the one hand, there is a certain academic standard, an expectation that you stick to things that have already been validated by slightly flawed statistical methods, but still. And then, on the flip side, there's needing to know what's going on. So, people said that the questionnaires made them feel like the people asking the questions thought that trans people ought to hate their bodies, and that they made them feel dysphoric, which is a word trans people use to describe the feeling of having your gender sort of undermined in some sense. So I fucked up.
Did you fuck up, though, or is it a completely valid question to ask? And if people were triggered by that, then they sort of also need to let science happen and go, well, I'm not going to answer that because that's triggering for me. This is my parallel to this, Reubs. I can't have a baby. I tried to have a baby. I had 4 years of fertility treatment. I can't have a baby. I've moved on from that now, and that's fine, and I'm not, thank goodness, particularly emotional about it. If there's a pro-choice march on, if I felt too emotional to go to that march, because I don't want to march with people going, oh, I want to choose to terminate. I want the ability to choose to terminate. That's not what they're saying. I want press the buzzer.
Oh, yeah.
I want the ability to choose to terminate. It's my body.
Or the right, really.
The right.
You have the ability.
That's true. Buzz again. The right to choose what happens to my body, then I should be able to make that choice. Now, I don't feel emotional about that. I would be happy to go on that march. But if I did, or another woman who couldn't conceive or had miscarried felt too emotional to go on the march, then my opinion is, as a feminist, you need to stay home, not march and not look, but not object to the march happening. Because your feminist sisters need to march for something that maybe doesn't involve you. Maybe it does make you feel excluded, but it needs to happen. And I feel similarly, that research may be really useful for transgender people down the line, because it makes some transgender people feel emotional now. It doesn't mean that you, as a non-binary transgender person... Did I do that well? No, buzzer went off.
Oh, pink.
Leyla, that's not fair. You can't buzz. That's not fair.
Buzz Leyla for meanness.
Yeah.
I feel like we should have a buzzer for telling people they can't buzz.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Control.
I feel that future generations of transgender or non-binary people might need your research more than these people need not to feel upset.
I could have responded better to the criticism.
Couldn't we all? Leyla Hussein, you are an anti-FGM activist. Do you have any minefields in your life?
Isn't that what happens in my life all the time? For me, I remember just a couple of months ago, when Jimmy Mandin and Goza made a comment, because I'm the black woman, so they contacted me, the media, to kind of
to speak
for
your people.
Leyla was saying, we know you work on gender and women's genitals. What are your thoughts on this? And I was like, oh my God, I just came off a 9-hour flight. I don't know how to respond to this. But I think for me, I have an experience of constantly being labelled or being told I need to be fitted into a particular box. I know that because I'm constantly told I'm a woman, which I am. You're a Muslim because you've undergone FGM, so it means you might not have experienced any sexual pleasure. That's not true. So this idea that my gender or gender identity is constantly boxed into one place based on an experience that I had of undergoing the practice. I don't know if that kind of fits into this, because this is something I'm still learning about, but it's a conversation that needs to be had amongst everybody, I guess, because I'm raising a 14-year-old. Anyone here raising a teenager? Oh, they are so much fun. Oh, God. I'm really enjoying the fact that she ignores me most of the time. It's brilliant. I get to watch Netflix without being interrupted. And it's brilliant. I really love it. And the fact I'm raising this 14-year-old, we do have these conversations. And so we talked about sex and sexuality and about gender. So one day, I think we were at a family dinner. This is a Muslim family, just pointing that out. So she came and said, oh, Mum, I think I'm gay. And my Muslim mother going, oh, subhanAllah, oh my God, Leyla, the conversation you have with your child. And she said, do I have to constantly identify my gender because you brought me up to be a human being? And I said, well, that's your choice. At the end of the day, there's a choice that we are talking about here. But it was really interesting, her interpretation of being gay, which was she just didn't like boys they smelled. And she wanted to hang out with girls.
How old was she?
She was 9 at the time. So that was her interpretation of it. But for me, going back to maybe the environment I created for her early on, my child is a bloody alien in her school, poor thing, because she's been brought up by me, which means when she goes to school, she is an outsider because she was saying the word misogynist at the age of 7.
That's parenting.
Yeah, say that to the other parents. Yeah, so really, I think I know we use the word minefield, but really I am in that space at the moment, and I know whenever a black person makes any comment, a black celebrity makes a comment about trans, Leyla Hussein gets the call because I work something to do with genitals, apparently. So, yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know if that's...
So the fact that you're called because you're anti-FGM when something comes up about trans issues does really show the broad brush strokes the media work in.
Yeah, it's really bizarre, yeah.
Kate, is this the right thing to say? Get ready for the buzzer. Are you the vicar of a queer congregation or a queer-inclusive congregation?
Actually, queer and queer-inclusive are fine. Vicar is a job title and it's not my job title.
Oh. Thank you.
So most vicars are parish priests in the Church of England, and I am a chaplain at a university, and I think my job title is clergy on staff. I should really know.
Clergy on staff?
Clergy on
that
staff.
Sounds like a 1970s television show about a vicar who solves crimes. Clergy on staff.
Are there
Last week on Clergy on Staff.
Are there clergy off staff?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I mean, not officially, but there's loads of
But
MCC clergy who don't work for my church. So, yeah, technically.
Those lazy bastards.
Or are they volunteers? So actually, they're not lazy at all.
No, well, I've never seen them.
Oh, amateur detectives.
Also, I just realised I said my church, meaning the church I attend, but in some church circles, that's a massive minefield. If somebody with a collar says my church,
Thank you.
big thing.
What's your minefield?
So I get a huge amount of privilege in all sorts of ways being a priest. Firstly, you can just walk into places because nobody ever wants to stop the vicar. A couple of months ago, I was a vicar on crutches because I use the term vicar because that's how people see me rather than because that's my...
Because if you're listening at home, she's wearing a dog collar like the Vicar of Dibley.
Yeah,
but she's got pink hair, which is not like the Vicar of Dibley.
But people call me Dibley in the street. Aww. Somebody walked past me in the street the other day and went, "Are you a vicar?" For the sake of argument. Like, Dibley! I get that from men particularly a lot. And it's an age thing, because obviously I work with students most of the time and they don't know the Vicar of Dibley. So I made a reference the other day and they went...
I like that they check first. Yeah. They don't just walk past and go, Dibley! Yeah. They want to be sure.
Excuse me, are you a vicar? Yes. Dibley! Dibley, Dibley, Dibley! Dibley, Dibley, do! Lads, 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 lads! Dibley, Dibley, do! Sorry, are you sure you're a vicar? Yeah, great.
Oh no, I get, are you sure, a lot. So when I first started at work, people would knock on my door and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking for the chaplain." And I'd say, "Oh, you know, I'm sat at the chaplain's desk in the chaplain's office. Shall we take a wild guess what my job is?" And then I'd have to explain that at the time I wasn't ordained, so I was just wearing civvies. But I am a chaplain. I am entitled to be here. You can talk to me. I always assumed, and I may be wrong, that what they meant was, "I'm sorry, I was looking for a man."
The same thing happens if you're a comedian. Come out onto the stage and the audience go, "Sorry, we were looking for a man." Is that
also
true?
Also science.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah.
They're like, "I was looking for the scientist."
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't get that because you're an FGM anti-activist and people look at you and go, "Yeah, that's..."
Kind of obvious, isn't it? Yeah.
Is that okay to say? You can press the button.
No, actually, I think that's okay to say.
Okay, great. Thank God.
I know. Oh, God. Tonight is literally like, I was saying the right stuff. And I'm known for not being PC, but tonight the PC gas is on me. Like, it's just, I'm really careful.
Is it a gas now?
It's gas.
Oh, man, it's everywhere.
I'm not insinuating something else.
Keep it going for Carrie Quinlan!
I'm terrified of minefields. I'm terrified of tonight. Because, you know, that's unusual for people. All those people who love minefields want to marry minefields. I'm more terrified of conversational minefields than I am of actual minefields. Because you don't generally get actual minefields in West Norwood. But you do get conversational minefields. And I'm partly frightened in the way that people are frightened of heights. Because they say that if you're frightened of heights, part of it is because if you're in a high place, there's a bit of your lizard brain that wants to jump. And I'm partly frightened of minefields because sometimes I want to step on a minefield for fun. Not often, and not in a terrible way. But, for example, when my dad died a few years ago, we had a memorial service. We're a Catholic family, and it was quite a big memorial service, and there were several priests who were all wearing matching memorial-y vestments. It was lovely. And afterwards, I was chatting to one of them, and I didn't really know what to say. And so I said, "Were you all a bit embarrassed that you turned up in the same dress?" Kind of just to see what would happen. And he was a Jesuit, so, you know, reasonably cool. And it was fine. Totally fine. And so sometimes that happens with my mouth. Other times I'll jump up and down on a mine by accident, even though I know it's there, because I won't have realised how big it is. So I was at a book launch some years ago, and I had a new boyfriend because it was a different life. And I was at this book launch, and I went to get us a couple of drinks, and I came back, and a friend of mine was talking to him who hadn't yet met him, and I could tell was flirting. This is not a problem. And a normal person would see, "Oh, there's potential mine there. I'll just introduce them, and we'll skip over the mine, and all will be fine." This is what a normal person would do. I thought, brilliant, mine. I'll diffuse it by pointing it out really loudly. And I said, "Oh, that's amazing that you're flirting with him, because this is my new boyfriend." Now, she didn't know that this was my new boyfriend, and he, because he was that kind of chap, didn't notice that she'd been flirting. So everyone's horrified. I genuinely thought that was the way of diffusing the mine. And it turned out I was jumping up and down hard on this fucking mine. And they were never, ever able to look each other in the eye at any point. But we broke up, it's fine. So there's those kinds of mine. And then, and this is the kind of mine we're talking about tonight, is the mine that I don't even know is there, partly because I'm a privileged white middle-class woman who grew up in the home counties. So I can't see them. But I do try my best. I was involved in the Guilty Feminist US election special in November, and I think this is partly why I've been asked to be here tonight. I, at one point, referred to the audience as ladies and gentlemen, thinking absolutely nothing of it, just skipping over that mine. A mine I didn't even know was there, but thankfully, the brilliant Avery Edison was there. And she pointed out, rightly and in her immensely gentle way, that there might be non-binary people in the audience, and she, in her immensely gentle way, tore me a new arsehole. And rightly so. Rightly so. And now I'm worried that the tore me a new arsehole is a mine. Is it? Oh, someone just went, yeah. I apologise. But this is the thing. This is what I do. And I want to learn. And I think I'm a reasonably decent person, apart from some of the stories I've told. And I want to learn, and I want to try. And actually, I was crushed. I was absolutely crushed. And there was a good 10 minutes where I didn't say anything, because I just thought, oh, God, I'm the worst person in the world. I must not speak. But I think I needed to go through that. And I'm glad she did it. And I'm glad she pointed that out, because I want to learn. Minds like that are the really tricky minds, because if she hadn't said anything, that mine would not have blown me up. But it would have blown someone up. Or it could have blown someone up. And I don't want that, because I'm nice. Reasonably. And I think what I want to say is these kinds of minds blow you up if you're trying your best. And we have to allow that. So you have to allow yourself to get blown up, I think, in order to learn. Because these minds are going to blow someone up even if it's not you. So do your best, learn, stand on the mine. Maybe don't jump up and down on it, but stand on the mine and take it if someone tells you you've stepped on the mine. Because that way we'll all learn and we'll all get better. Thank you very much.
So this is my question. When the march happened, some women knitted hats that they called pussy hats that were in the shape of genitalia. And
I thought they were cats.
They were not cats. They were, and the comment that I saw a lot on the internet and in some op-ed pieces was that these were trans exclusionary because a lot of trans women don't have vaginas. And my thought was they were in a direct response to Donald Trump saying pussy grabbing. Likewise, I've seen pieces saying female genital mutilation is trans exclusionary because not all female genitalia involves a clitoris. Some female genitalia includes a penis and the other things that come with a penis. Testicles.
Oh, this conversation's getting interesting.
So my feeling is I want trans men, and it's, I mean, as soon as I say it, I'm like, oh, privilege, privilege, privilege.
The hand is hovering over the buzzer for people listening at home.
My feeling is that I want feminists to tribe up. So I love it when trans women wear the pussy hat and go, yeah, fuck off our pussies. Even if that trans woman doesn't personally have a vagina, she has a penis. I love it when transgender women go, fuck you, get off our female genitalia. In this case, I'm talking about a clitoris, or I could be talking about a foreskin. But fuck you. And I love it when cis women march with trans women and go, fuck off, don't tell us that our sisters aren't our sisters. And I want feminists to march together and not say, but you're excluding me if you talk about female genital mutilation because I don't have a clitoris. I think female genital mutilation can't just be called genital mutilation because it's a misogynistic act. That's what I want to put on the table. And I really feel I need to say Leyla and Reubs.
And I love how she's staring at me when she's talking about FGM.
I'm going to say Leyla and Reubs, talk about that and reach a conclusion.
Well, actually, I want to clarify. You know, there is that assumption that women who've undergone FGM don't have clitoris, but the actual clitoris organ is actually still inside. It's still there.
Please buzz the buzzer, because I said that it wasn't. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. I did not know
So I'd
that.
like to clarify that for people.
when you want the buzzer buzz.
Sorry, no, I can't buzz myself. It's rude at the table.
Using her privilege. I remember reading that statement, and for me, where I stand on this, again, it's the idea of being boxed yet again. And for me, one thing I've always believed, anytime any of us are in any struggle, for me, solidarity is what meant more to me than anything. Not whether you had a genital, you didn't have a genital, you didn't have a clitoris or not. If I'm in a battle, I expect you to come and stand beside me and we'll be there together. And if you were struggling, I'm with you because your struggle is my struggle. I know it sounds quite corny to say this, but for me, it's always been that simple. So it wasn't this idea that we focus on. I think sometimes some people are just given these column inches just to write this stuff, and I find it to be a time waste. I was at the Women's March. I just chose not to wear the pussy hat. I just didn't go with my outfit, for one. And as Somalis, the orange colour means a lot to us, the burnt orange. So the fact that an orange man won the elections in America, I wanted to reclaim the orange. So that's what I did at the Women's March. So to me, it just didn't mean anything to me. So for me, solidarity really, it's where I stand on this. So if you say to an FGM survivor, one will say to you, I know maybe a quarter of my clitoris is missing. What do you say to the one who's all the outer clitoris is missing? So do I say, you can't be part of this? So for me, I really don't like this idea of we focus on whether someone should be at a struggle or not. So solidarity, I think, is the word that I'm looking for.
Reubs.
Right. Okay, hot take on this. I think that female genital mutilation is done based on a perception of someone as female.
Well, we are guilty because we were born as females. That's why FGM happened in the first place.
Right.
Yep.
So, if it excludes anyone, it's trans masculine people, not trans women. Not that means it doesn't matter, just that it means I'm less qualified to take a position. But there would be better words. There could be better words for it, definitely. It would be better if it was called... I don't know, because there's too many different kinds. No, I think misogynistic genital mutilation, that would be a better way of phrasing it, but the term already exists. And there's a debate, or there has been a debate, it's sort of died now, and I think that's the right thing, within the trans community about the word trans, because it implies that you start somewhere and you end up somewhere else, whereas most trans people feel like, well, first of all, everyone is going on a gender journey from the minute that they start to experience gender till they die, and that's not just trans people, so that's problematic. And then also because the implication that, that they're sort of born a man as opposed to born a baby thing. So the word trans is, or has been, criticised as not the best word to describe the thing, on grounds of trans inclusion. My feeling is that the term FGM I don't find it exclusionary. The pussy hats, on the other hand... in and of themselves, it's fine. I think it was the combination of it being pussy hats and the Women's March, and there was a feeling that there was an equation going on there, that one was the same as the other. But again, I understand Deborah's point about standing in solidarity.
It's because I feel that was direct response to Donald Trump talking about pussy grabbing.
Yeah,
I didn't feel those hats would have been there just as a metonymy for womanhood.
Yeah.
It was
there were a lot of men wearing it.
There were a lot of men wearing it.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the same how I feel about my friend who's already past the menopause, saying, I'll get angry about the tampon tax, even though I don't need tampons anymore.
Oh, please don't start that conversation.
But do you see what I mean, Reubs? So, and I know you don't speak for all trans people and
No,
all
that's true.
non-binary
On behalf
people.
of my people.
Is there a language? If I said on Twitter what I think those hats are there as a response to a specific reference to Donald Trump, the President of the United States, being able to talk about pussy grabbing and then be elected as one of the most powerful people in the world, and I want my trans sisters to march with me. If women want to wear a vagina on their head, I don't want to stop them.
I think the little cat ears, for me, with them, it was kind of like, I think the reason I was okay with those is because I feel like, and I move in a circle where it's common for trans people to refer to their genitals in a way that might not be immediately congruent with how cis people would see their genitals, which is to say, you might have a dick, but you call it a clit, or you call it a vagina, or you call it a pussy. Actually, not you have a dick. You have a thing that people think looks like a dick, but...
She just buzzed herself.
It's a
Reubs
clit.
buzzed herself.
Yeah. At the table. I'm so sorry, guys.
So you have something that other people would identify as a penis, but is in fact
Yeah.
functions as a vagina to you?
If you identify as female, then
But
the
medically it operates as a penis, doesn't
yeah,
it?
but medically schmedically. Like, speaking as someone who works in a medical faculty, that's not the point. Like, the words we use for our body parts are very, very personal. To me, it doesn't matter if what somebody calls their body parts as long as it's congruent with how they feel. And so, as a result of that, I feel like the pussy hats that were actually cats, that were therefore a reference to a word, they were fine. But the actual, like, sculptures of vaginas, I don't mind the obscenity, but it's the equation between...
But if that person has a vagina that looks like a traditional vagina, why can't she wear it on her head? That doesn't... I don't think traditional 5 bars, whatever. Vagina classic. Whatever you want to call it.
I love it.
Why can't she wear it on her
that
head? I don't see how that excludes... I see that that's saying this is one sort of vagina. Now, if she goes, this is the only vagina in the world, there's no other sort of vagina. Kate.
I think the problem is that nobody was going around wearing things that looked like what we would think of as male gender genitalia and saying, I'm a woman and this is mine and I'm entitled to it and you can't grab this either. And so it became a cis conversation.
But isn't that, in a way, for trans women to do? It's not for cis women to start wearing a phallus on their head and saying, this also is a vagina. Because it's not my experience. And I think that would be like, what's genital appropriation? Genital appropriation, that's what it is. Do you see what I mean?
But I can't, as a white person, because I realise people who aren't in the room can't see that about me, like, I'm not going to go to the Women's March and go, well, I'm going to represent black women today, and I've painted myself accordingly because that's horrific, and if that is ever taken out of context, I'm in so much trouble.
The audience, don't do it.
But at the same time,
Reverend
I can
Kate
say...
Harford is blacked up tonight. I think if you are home... It was a shock to us all. She's blacked up and she's wearing a penis on her head and it says, this is a vagina, fuck you. This is not a pipe.
But she's making it work.
Yeah, it really goes with the collar. It just goes somehow.
But the point is, I can't claim either of those spaces, but I can acknowledge that they weren't, that nobody was creating them, that nobody was invited. People didn't feel... I'm sorry, I now think I'm speaking for other people and I want to buzz myself a bit, but the impression I got from what was being said to me is that nobody felt like they'd been offered the space.
Yeah, so I was going to say, it takes quite a lot of preparation to sculpt a 3D impression of your own vagina to wear on your head. And if you're going to that much preparation, you could perhaps email a trans sister and say, I'm doing this, do you think it's okay? Do you want to march next to me with something that looks more like what you've got, stroke had? I feel like saying that this is what I've got isn't really... I feel like it's not really a sufficient excuse because it's not a spur-of-the-moment decision to take your vagina off and put it on your head.
But the
it was a single pattern, wasn't it? People weren't knitting their own.
I don't think it was a 3D printer situation, no.
Sitting in front of a mirror.
Reubs, can I push back,
Deborah.
given this is Minefields?
Certainly.
Okay. On that, though, the pussies that Trump is grabbing and talking about grabbing are vagina classic.
The original ones.
How do you know that? And how does he know that?
Oh, good question.
Good question. That's a good move, isn't it? That's a good move. Yeah.
Good question.
Okay. The pussies trump. Oh, this is awful words. All of these. Oh. I'm not liking any of these words.
We're going to break the buzzer on this, aren't
Yeah.
we?
He doesn't think he's attracted to trans women.
Yes, because I know he's such a horrible alpha macho, horrible man. He wants to grab cisgendered vaginas. Do you see what I mean? Sometimes, what's happening to me now, because I do a feminist podcast, I speak about this stuff a lot. I edit out any reference to my vagina, any reference to my period, any reference to ovaries, any reference to anything that is of my body. And I feel like the cis female body is still under attack.
Absolutely.
It's still under invasion. We don't have enough rights yet. Like, my cisgendered sisters in Northern Ireland have to get on a fucking ferry.
And transmasculine brothers.
And my transmasculine brothers have to get... Just edit in me saying that, though. Have to get on a ferry from my country, and we go on about America and... No, in the United Kingdom, in order to have like a little tiny collection of cells that is going to grow into a huge life-changing responsibility. They have to get on a ferry that maybe they can ill afford to come here because their bodies are under attack. And those bodies include ovaries, uteruses. Those bodies bleed every month. And while there's a tampon tax, and while those bodies are under invasion, are under attack, I feel I need to stop editing out those words. Absolutely. And at the moment, I edit them out all the time. And it really is starting to worry me. I so genuinely, with all of my heart, believe my trans sisters are women. I don't have a secret thing where I go, yeah, but they're not. I don't. 100%.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, it is, oh, some of my best friends are trans. I don't mean that, but I do mean...
I have a friend who's
She doesn't have any trans friends.
and she's got black friends too. Yeah.
But I do mean this, that, it's really hard for me to see my trans female friends as male. I don't see them that way. I don't feel that way. But I feel like I want the solidarity to be... And I understand why at the moment the transgender community is saying more space for us, because there's been traditionally no space. And I understand the anger and I understand the need to occupy some space. It's absolutely fucking valid. But Reubs, how do we work together, all of us, so that Leyla feels 100% supported in her real live work to stop the clitorises of cisgendered teenage girls and
babies.
And babies, we don't know yet whether they're male or female because they haven't had time to understand their identity. How do we talk about the clitoris? How do we salute the vagina? How do we say this is my fucking ovaries and not in a way be trans exclusionary? How do we make this happen?
I think part of what makes it tricky is the tendency of TERFs. They don't like being called TERFs, which is part of why I called them it, which stands for trans exclusionary radical feminists, and it's people like Germaine Greer who say that you're not a woman if you haven't had a big smelly vagina, or alternatively, that you're not a woman if your vagina was created surgically because then it's big and smelly. Genuinely, two separate quotes.
She also said we shouldn't intervene in FGM because it's a cultural practice. So
Yeah.
this is a special person.
Germaine is not invited on the podcast. I think is what we've just learned.
She is
I'm
a
protesting the day.
special kind of she's very special and God loves her.
Kate, is that true? You have daily conversations.
I can't
with-
speak for my employer.
Okay. So people like that love to make a big deal out of the physiology and the medical definition of sex in a way that is outdated, inconsistent with science, and definitely inconsistent with people's lived experiences. And they do that by, in my view, misappropriating the exact language that Deborah now, wrongly, I think, has been made to feel she needs to edit out of this podcast.
I think there should be a podcast that we should call it Deborah Reclaiming Her Body.
I feel, look, I'm privileged. I've got a cis body with, 2 arms and 2 legs and a perfectly functional vagina. So I'm not saying, oh, poor me. It's not about me. It's about the community of women whose bodies I feel are under attack. Yeah. And the fact that I notice, I'm not a radical, I wouldn't say I'm a radical feminist. I'd say I'm a pragmatic, liberal feminist who 100% wants to include and aspires to include all feminists.
But Deborah, this is where you use your privilege to do that. Privilege is not necessarily a bad thing. It's how you use privilege. So you created this stage, so you use that privilege to bring those conversations to the forefront. And this is where we come in. You occupy that space, we come in and support you. That's how it works.
Hello, it's Deborah Frances-White from The Guilty Feminist, briefly interrupting The Guilty Feminist to say that this coming Saturday, the 16th of September, Global Pillage is at the King's Place Podcast Festival in London at 4 p.m, featuring me, Desiree Birch, Rosie Jones, Francesco De Carlo and others at 4 p.m. If you'd like to get tickets for that, go to the King's Place website. This Saturday, the 16th of September. It's going to be a special Christmas/end-of-year festive episode. So it's going to be a really good fun one. Wear a Christmas hat if you'd like to. There's going to be lots and lots of good fun stuff going on. If you can't come to that one, you could book for the 5th of November or the 18th of November. Come along and be in the hive mind. If you'd like to see The Guilty Feminist and you are in Melbourne, Australia, we will be at the Wheeler Centre as part of the Festival of Questions. You can book for the whole day for $60 or just for the Guilty Feminist part, which is called What the Hell? The Handmaid's Tale in 2017, for $20. That's on the 15th of October in Melbourne. And you can book at wheelercentre.com. If you are in Sydney, you can see us at Giant Dwarf on the 18th, 19th and 21st of October. Tickets at giantdwarf.com.au. And if you would like to come and see us in Brisbane, we are at the State Library, Queensland on October the 20th. Go to trybooking.com. If you are in New Zealand and you would like to see us, The Guilty Feminist will be in Auckland at the Town Hall on the 28th and 29th of October. We've added an extra show there. And just go to ticketmaster.co.nz and you will find us. Today in the show, you can hear Reubs Walsh on our panel, and she is doing a show called Oi Sissy about all things trans and cis at the Amsterdam Fringe Festival from the 13th of September for a few nights. You can go to amsterdamfringefestival.ni if you'd like tickets for that. Or you can see the same show in London with Reubs Walsh at Camden People's Theatre on the 29th of September at 9 p.m. Go to cptheatre.co.uk to see Reubs Walsh doing that. Hope to see you live at some of these shows very soon. Back to The Guilty Feminist. We're going to hear a little bit from the wonderful Reubs Walsh. Put your hands together.
Oh, don't look so worried. It's okay. I mean, yes, I am trans, but I will only bite if you ask extra nicely, I promise. So, more important to know about me is, as we've talked about, I'm a neuroscientist, and being trans and a neuroscientist, I spend more time than I would like reading things that psychiatrists somehow manage to get published in peer-reviewed journals about trans people. So I thought it would amuse and interest to share some of these with you. So the first come as a pair: physical attractiveness of girls with gender identity disorder and physical attractiveness of boys with gender identity disorder. Now, in these two articles, cisgender adults rate the attractiveness of topless photos of trans children Yeah. So that's creepy. And then they've also helpfully labelled the articles, it was very useful to split them into a binary of genders with trans people. And then labelled the articles about girls, trans girls, with the word boys in the title, and the article about trans boys with the word girls in the title. So that's super helpful, especially like when you're trying to find the relevant article for a reference. I mean, not that anyone would ever need to reference this. It's not science, it's shit.
No.
Anyway, another thing. Video gaming and gaming addiction in transgender people. So we can't play games now. Apparently that's a pathology as well. And then, now this is a gem. The concept of autogynephilia and the typology of male gender dysphoria, in which this cis-white bloke, Ray Blanchard, who has always had this idea that the whole reason that trans people are trans is because it's somehow easier to find a partner of the opposite sex. That's right, Carrie. If you were a trans dude, you'd be getting all the girls. Because being trans is basically just being super gay. Like, I was swimming in glitter and diva music, and that's how I became a woman. So then you get people going, but I'm trans and gay. And he's like, yes, non-homosexual transgenderism. Well, that's obviously just where people get so obsessed with vaginas that they want one for themselves. It's just a kinky fetish for vaginas, because we all know that's so different from being a lesbian, because lesbians don't like vaginas at all.
No.
And then he also invented this other word, gynandromorphophilia, which is basically to describe men who fancy trans women. But then he has the audacity to go on Twitter and say, one of the problems with trans women insisting on existing is that of how we find attractive people to have sex with them. Now, people were pretty cross about this, and he was very surprised and outraged at their anger, which I don't have any sympathy for, but I just thought it was quite funny. Like, I'm definitely getting a lot more than him. Like, a lot more. Like, I don't want to do an empirical study on this. I mean, for a start, he'd probably come up with a new term, like slutiaris transgenderalius or something, to describe me. But also, he's blocked me on Twitter, so I can't get in touch with him. The reason I blocked him on Twitter, by the way, is because... No, he blocked me, rather, on Twitter. Is because he tweeted that there was this type of trans that didn't fit into his typology. And then he says, but is it true transgenderism? And I was like, yes, it is. Yes, the problem is that whenever something that's trans that doesn't fit into your made-up bullshit typology comes along, you try and classify it out of existence because you're a pseudoscientist, or words to that effect. So he blocked me. Thanks. Being blocked by Ray Blanchard is like a badge of approval in trans academic circles. You see what some academics get away with when studying trans people. And then you get actual parents make the actual parenting decision not to coercively gender their child before that kid is able to express their own gender identity. And they get told that it's a dangerous experiment, like the child's going to grow up to identify as a pineapple or something. Like the whole of society isn't just one massive unethical social experiment in the coercive gendering of children. Like, we have parties where we celebrate the genitals of unborn fetuses. Hooray for the uterus inside your uterus, we say. And then once they're born, we colour code them so that strangers can tell what shape their genitals are. Now, at some point, for most people, everyone stops obsessing about your genitals because it gets really creepy. But not if you're trans. Oh, no. Take airport security. They've got these new body scanners. Have you seen them? And I think the body scanner must look at me and go, well, you can't have both. One of those must be a gun. Like what? Like, I'm a fembot and I'm going to start firing explosives out of my nipples? Speaking of sci-fi women, though, the new Doctor, are we excited or what? Handy that she's a Time Lord stroke lady stroke time peer, though, because regeneration doesn't come with all the same paperwork as transition. I mean, sometimes I really feel like having a gender transition is mostly paperwork. I think some people imagine that trans people spend our lives standing in the consulting rooms of surgeons trying to choose from, I don't know, different exploding nipples. But actually, we just grab the ones with the automated fascist targeting and get back to the admin. Like, ever since the man of the people, commodity trader Nigel Farage, got so extremely on our collective tits that we fucked over our economy just to shut him up, I've been having to go back and forth to the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs trying to get a passport sorted. And it's the same as with the British ones. They want you to prove that you really are who you say you are. Now, I can understand that up to a point, but come on. This is my name, this is my gender, this is my existing passport with all of that stuff already on it. I didn't just do this on a whim. I didn't transition purely because I thought that a green passport with an F on it would go nicely with my green Fiorelli handbag. Maybe I should go down to their offices and, like, I don't know, show them my tits, but then they'd want them signed in triplicate and I've only got 2. So then I'm walking down the street and people are looking at me and I'm always thinking that they're trying to work out what I am. I mean, they're probably just admiring my hair and wondering what shampoo I use, but I think they're working out what I am. And so I try to show people what I am. I'm a scientist, I'm an activist, I'm a feminist, I'm a woman, and I'm really, really weird. Let's just accept that. But my gender, that's just my gender. Thanks.
Reubs, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Gender expression and gender identity. Actually, I'm going to throw this to Reubs and Kate. What's the difference between gender expression and gender identity? Because I don't think we talk about this enough. So there's your assigned gender at birth, which means the doctor says it's a boy or it's a girl. Then there's your gender identity. What's that?
It's who you are inside.
Okay, and what's your gender expression?
It's what you wear on the outside and how you express your experience of gender to other people. So the general division would be like, gender identity is words like woman or female, or man or male, and gender expression is more like femme and masculine.
And what does that have to do with our sexual orientation, Kate?
Absolutely nothing, genuinely. So for me, as a cis person, my gender assigned at birth lines up with my gender identity and happens to line up with my gender expression. But there are some people in the broader queer community for whom their expression of gender, they may see themselves as cis, but define, for example, as a stone butch or...
What's a stone butch? Can you just define that?
It's probably quite an old-fashioned term now, but I still see it used. Have people seen Orange is the New Black?
Yes.
Right, Big Boo. And Leia Delaria still defines as butch and has spoken in interviews about having to resist people assuming that she is a wannabe trans person. Because as a butch lesbian, people look at her and say, oh, well, but obviously if you understood gender correctly, you'd be non-binary or you'd be trans. So there are still specific queer gender expressions that we've honed over our history that exist kind of for us and in our space and are still cis expressions of gender.
So a sexual orientation is who we're attracted to.
Or nobody, if you are asexual or aromantic.
Very good point. Your gender assigned at birth is boy or girl, and that's usually based, or could be intersex, usually based on your genitalia at birth. Is that correct?
Well, no, not entirely. Intersex isn't a gender, intersex wouldn't be a gender assigned at birth, except possibly in Germany. Maybe a few other countries where
What do you mean, except possibly in Germany? What happens there?
Okay, so here when you're born, the midwife usually looks at what's between your legs and ticks a box on a form. So that's the highly scientific method that we use for assigning gender, and that's pretty much the case in almost all of the world. Recently, Germany changed the rules so that intersex babies could have an X instead of an M or an F, effectively.
And intersex means
and
that...
intersex is whenever somebody isn't completely sexually dimorphic, which is to say women with slightly above average testosterone levels are technically intersex.
I thought it was if you had... God, it has...
ambiguous genitals?
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's the most common definition. It's certainly the most important one for talking about assigned gender.
But slightly more testosterone makes you intersex, because I reckon I might have slightly more testosterone.
Well, it's technically an intersex condition, yeah. When we talk about assigned sex at birth or assigned gender at birth, it's an administrative decision that is taken. And as a result, intersex babies in this context mostly means people with ambiguous genitals.
Right.
And it's probably important, since we're on the subject, to note that it is still relatively common practice, even in this country, to do surgery on these babies to make them either one thing or the other, obviously without the baby's consent and sometimes even without the parents' consent or knowledge.
Really?
Yes.
What, they just take the baby, operate on its genitalia? This really steps into your zone, Leyla, with female genital mutilation.
Yeah, well, talk about minefield in this. I mean, before we actually go into the work that I do, but I think what the question I want to ask, so are we saying, is gender identification a condition that we all kind of took on?
It's sort of based on whether the nurse who picked us up first found an innie or an outie.
Yeah,
and then we're expected to take that on it feels to me almost as arbitrary as your belly button. So you're given this and you're going to be assigned it for the rest of your life and conditioned through it. And even really high profile conversations about the experiences of trans women when they were being gendered by other people as male are all conditioned by the fact that we assume that there are these two fundamental conditions and that our experiences are entirely shaped by that initial decision of one nurse in 1 minute.
Will that step into the camp for you with female genital mutilation or genital mutilation?
Yeah, because for me, what this whole conversation is bringing up for me is that we live in a society where we're obsessed with people, like we judge people based on their genitals. So, for example, women like myself and over 200 million other women were mutilated based on their gender because there was this condition in order for you to be accepted to be a woman in this society, actually we're going to remove your clitoris, your labias, both labias. Actually, to make sure you're sexually controlled, we're going to actually close your whole genitals. So for me, there's no consent. This is happening to children. No one makes that decision. But for me, the word conditioning keeps coming up actually in this conversation. That's what
My friend was telling me her little daughter was 2, and my friend was telling me that her daughter was saying, "Mummy's a girl," and she said, "Yes," and she said, "I'm a girl, yes, but Daddy's a boy," and she said, "I thought, oh, well, yes, but I mean, it's not. You don't want to be imposing gender on everyone, darling." But she said, "I thought gender fluidity was too much for a 2-year-old." So I just went, yes. And she said, "I did think, oh," but I said, we were talking about it, and I said, she's just finding ways to categorise the world. So she's also going, these are children, these are grown-ups, these are children who go to my nursery, these are the children that go to the other nursery, these boys, these are girls. She's finding a way to categorise, to make sense of the world, and human beings have to be able to quickly make decisions.
Is it more label than categorising?
I think it's where it comes from, that we want to make quick choices, which probably comes from a desire to tribe and survive. Where it becomes unuseful is where we say everyone's got to be in this camp or this camp and stay in their camp. And we've also decided there are forms of expression. Gender expression to me seems to be almost entirely arbitrary. In the 1700s, men powdered their faces, wore makeup, powdered their hair, wore wigs and wore high heels.
Yeah.
And how would you have felt about doing that then?
Not super, probably. Probably really not super. Probably would have felt like wearing a big man sign.
But today you're wearing heels.
I am indeed, yes.
Because that's a gender expression of femininity in our society.
Well, it goes with my outfit. Yes,
sure.
Because it's a gender expression of femininity.
But that's interesting, isn't it? Because that is entirely cultural then. It's like what the boys are wearing, because that feels like my tribe. We really have to start getting our head around this. It seems to me implausible that of the 6 billion people in the world, every single one of those fits over here or over here.
It's a bit like astrology. I need to read this made-up column that tells me how I'm going to behave as an Aquarian today. And I could just as easily pick up a magazine for women that says, okay, so today you're going to be wearing pink lipstick rather than red, and your skin tone has to be changed in this particular way, and your eyes have to be highlighted in this particular way, and this is where you're going to buy your clothes, and this is how you're going to have sex because you're a woman.
Where can I get this magazine? It seems like it solved all of my problems. I'm sort of like, yeah, sure. I make no further decisions. I was really drawn in then. Give me glamour. Boom. It's true, that imposition of gender, it's basically thrust on all of us. But also I do enjoy, and I wonder, do I just enjoy the tribal space? Or is there something about the dress up? I sometimes think it's a sort of female privilege to dress up. I sometimes wonder why the patriarchy let us have it. Because they take all of the good stuff, but they let us have glitter.
Well, let's not say...
Why did they not snatch it for themselves?
Well,
I don't understand.
Let's not say they let us have it. Let's say we took it.
But come on, what else have we taken? Fuck all.
I mean, if there was space for us to take something and we chose glitter, then we deserve this shit.
I don't know, I really like glitter.
Oh, yeah, no, it's brilliant. But
Do you know what I mean, though? We get all of the interesting clothes. I just look at men sometimes, and I think...
Is it for them, though? Is that what it is? Because it's for them.
Yeah,
And this is
partly.
the conversation I've had with a lot of feminists who said to me, oh, no, you're not a feminist because you're wearing red lipstick and high heels and you're doing this for men. And I remember actually looking around the room and I thought, there are a lot of angry feminists in this room. I don't see a guy.
But, like,
You know,
what if you were
did it-
gay? Like, maybe you were dressing up because you wanted to attract a woman.
But
Like,
what's
I mean,
wrong with
that's
wanting to
also
attract
true.
them?
But
That's the
I
thing.
just think gender expression is largely for yourself. Like,
Yes.
it's how I feel comfortable going out of the house. And of course it's to attract people I'm attracted to. Of course it's so other women are jealous of my handbag. I'm only human. But I do often look at... now, this is... we sometimes call Reubs Walsh the rephraser, because I'll say something in certain language and then we basically go like she's a superhero. So I may be going
My
to
language
say...
senses are tingling.
Yeah, exactly. I may be going to say this the incorrect way, but I think there's a lot of times where expressions associated with extreme femme is seen as a pejorative by the feminist community. And it's like, well, that's not as good. Is it because it's frivolous? Is it because it's an extreme form of femininity? Is it because it's seen as entertaining gentleman callers? And that we're there really just putting our wares on display for the patriarchy? What is that kind of femmephobia, and is it appropriate?
I mean, I worry that femmephobia actually comes from wanting to be the cool girl, you know, wanting to fit in with the patriarchy. If you wear trousers and wear a tailored suit and go into work in, you know, even if you're wearing heels, you're wearing the uniform of the workplace. But who established the uniform of the workplace? It wasn't us. I was in my workplace for about 6 months before I put all my piercings back in. And, it, you know, it's all these little insidious things where you think, I'm not going to look fully professional if I walk into work with a nose ring. Or I'm not going to look, somebody's laughing because I've got pink hair and I'm worried about my nose ring. But, you know, again, are people going to take me seriously if I have pink hair? And eventually I just go, oh, sod it, they seem to take me seriously. I'll just dye my hair pink. It's probably fine. Now I can't dye it back because if I go into work with a hat on, people don't know who I am. But that's a whole other problem.
One way in which I think it's a bit trans-exclusionary to be anti-femme, because I think one way in which transgender women get to exercise their gender expression is by playing in that space, is by saying, I'm going to put on the external attributes of femininity, in inverted commas, in order to tell the world who I really am. Is that true, Reubs?
I think so. I think I said to my mum recently, I can't remember why, I think I was whinging about a boy or something. I said to her recently, you know, you didn't have a teenage daughter before, and now I'm 26 and you do. And I think all of the hormone-related stuff to one side, I think coming out as trans involves exploring gender in a way that we do during our sort of early to mid-adolescence. And so there's a reason why trans people early on in their transition often look a little bit exaggerated. And part of it is about trying to give the cues that are necessary in a society where bodies are seen as far more important signifiers of gender to override that. But part of it is about trying to reclaim that space, learn where the lines are. There's a brilliant phrase that some clever cis people who are good with trans children in their clinic came up with, this expression of gender literacy, learning where the lines are, learning the way through the town that you've just moved to of Womanville or Butch Womanville or, you know, or something else entirely Ville. So I think
So you can tribe up. It's a bit like if you move to a new school and at your old school, all the girls wore makeup, and the new school, nobody does. And suddenly you think, oh, I'm overgendered. If you're a cis woman, you can suddenly find yourself. Does anyone remember this as an adolescent? You find yourself in an environment where you're not saying the right words, you don't have the right slang, everyone else has got a nickname and you don't, and something about your outfit is wrong. And you can't quite put your finger on what it is either. And then someone might take you aside and go, we don't dress like that here. And you tribe up because you don't want to be ostracised, you don't want to be bullied, you don't want to draw attention.
It's that wanting to belong to a particular group.
Desperately wanting to belong. And on that, gender-neutral bathrooms, minefield. Thank you.
I think
sounds
your
like the doorbell.
Mind insistence on the buzzer was a little bit oppressive.
Do you?
Oppressive.
Oh! Boom!
We are a team.
It's puns like
It's
that.
a
that you
comedy
can-
podcast, guys.
So, Reubs, gender-neutral bathrooms.
Please.
As a non-binary person, is that all right to say?
Yep.
I've said it now. As a non-binary person, how do you feel about gender-neutral bathrooms?
It's handy to be able to pee.
Right. Good. And
If you take nothing else away from tonight,
it's handy to be able to pee.
say that.
Yeah.
Do you have gender-neutral bathrooms?
We don't own our own building, so we are at the mercies of the building we're in spaces where we can take ownership of them. So, for example, at MCC General Conference, we always make sure that all of the toilets are entirely gender neutral. So there will be sanitary provision in any bathroom, regardless of where it started. You know, if there's deodorants provided in one bathroom, then we'll get the venue to provide them in both. You know, all of that kind of stuff. So it's not just about whether you have a urinal or a cubicle. It's really what space have you walked into.
Right.
And, you know, some things we can't change. If one was tiled pink because they expected people with vaginas to be using it, then there's not much we can do about that. But part of being fully inclusive is saying, actually, this is what you do. And I know there has been some move to saying things like, well, the accessible toilet should be accessible to everybody. But what that's kind of saying is pathologizing the idea that you don't feel comfortable in either stick figure with skirt or stick figure with trousers toilet. Yeah. So you have to go to this other one, which ordinarily we reserve for people with particular need, because we've suddenly decided that you have particular need. But to be honest, I have to admit, I'm slightly baffled by the fact we gender toilets at all. Maybe it's because I spend a lot of time in queer spaces, but I'm not really worried about who's in the next door cubicle, or if I can't see the urinals, I'm not that fussed. I don't really like to watch other people pee, but that's my preference. I can always go to a toilet without a urinal, and that's a much easier decision for me to make than to have to decide whether I'm going to go to the toilet where I might experience violence because people read me as female, or I might experience violence because people read me as male. You know, my decision that I don't really like to see people pee is a very minor thing in the grand scheme of things.
I was going to ask about this, because is there a decent argument for gendered toilets? Because I don't understand why toilets are gendered.
Well, I think it's tradition. Of course, if they weren't,
That conditioning
then
a good reason.
There's this idea of being conditioned. I mean, for me, my only issues with toilets has been the long queues.
Yeah.
That is what I have an issue with. I don't care who's... If there's a man or,
Sometimes I really
behind.
wish I'd dressed more butch so I could use the men's when there's a long queue, because it's like, well, I need to pee.
One argument Reubs raised to me is that some transgender women who feel they fought very hard to get to use the ladies' room, and that the ladies' room is a sort of sacred space where you can do your makeup that smells relatively nice, where you can talk with other girls.
That hasn't been my experience. Speaking as someone who sort of went from one and then to the other with a big overlap in the middle, my experience has not been that the ladies' rooms smell better.
Ooh, that's interesting.
It's just...
I think they do.
I think that's the most controversial thing that has been said on either of these podcasts.
Or ever in the history of the Guilty Feminist. And I'm not saying this as an argument for, but I'm saying when you ask what are the arguments, one of the arguments is all the girls go to the loo together and we all have a lovely chat in the loo, we meet in the loo, and sometimes we want to talk about a boy who's in the nightclub. And so we have it like a little tribal safe space.
It really is.
And there are women who have been... Okay, I'm just going to put this out on the table because it's Minefields and we've always got the edit. There are women who've been sexually assaulted who do not want to be in a confined space. So say it's late at night, it's 2 a.m, you go into the nightclub bathroom, there's only you, and you come out of a stall and there's a big man right there, and it's a sort of secluded area, it's an area where people are taking their pants down. It suddenly feels dangerous to them, and they want a gendered space where they feel safe. Now, that to me is not ever a reason to exclude trans women or non-binary people. But, sorry, if you are a cis man and in your audience, I'm not assuming you're going to assault me in a loo.
And if you are, I think the sign on the door probably isn't going to stop you.
Yeah. No. I don't think that's true. I think the fact that it is routine, if a man is seen to go into the ladies' room and someone sees, they'll go, what's he going in there for? He's much more likely to be stopped. If it's routine, then much less likely to be. Right. But I would say there's certain spaces like nightclubs.
There is a whole construct of, we're sort of playing violence hierarchy, aren't we, really? It's so trying to keep women safe, but also, you know, actually trans people are more likely to be attacked for going into the wrong bathroom than a cis woman is likely to be attacked in a gender-neutral space, as far as we know, and I realise these are really difficult things to measure. But violence against trans women, particularly trans women of colour, of all the people on this earth, trans women of colour are the most likely to be victims of violence. So if we're working out who we're protecting, surely the protection default is towards the most vulnerable. Now, there are always other options. There is nothing to stop a woman who needs her own space from using the accessible toilet. And frankly, if you've experienced that kind of violence in an enclosed space, you may wish to be around nobody. And that should also be completely acceptable, to just claim that you need access to that space because your history should give you that right. Maybe it's because I don't really go to clubs where there are straight people, but I'd never be able to talk about anybody in the toilet because literally anybody could be in the cubicle next to you at any point. Or you're doing your makeup, but the person you're doing your makeup next to could be of any gender or none, and you have no idea. And they might be the person your mate was just snogging, but you're not really sure because it was a bit dark, so maybe it's best just not to say anything. I don't know, maybe we just do our gossiping somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that gossip is a good enough reason to exclude people. I'm just saying when you asked about the reasons, one reason is transgender women often feel like, I've worked really hard to get into this loo, and now you're saying this loo is for everybody.
Yeah, I think my feeling is I think that's comparatively trivial to if I go into that bathroom I will be assaulted, and if I don't go into that bathroom I will wet myself.
Have you ever had an incident in a bathroom where someone's questioned you?
Yeah.
It's
pretty routine, and most trans people have experienced it at some point.
Is there a solution that you can see that could be implemented in the next 12 months, Reubs?
No pressure.
The short-term solution is to make toilets gender neutral. The longer-term solution is actually, why do we have these like long rows of... It doesn't save very much space to do the long rows of cubicles thing. So if you just have single-person little rooms, which you have in a lot of places anyway, I mean, you have one in your home, probably. I mean, if you have that individual space with one toilet in it and a sink, that is much easier. And it also then immediately makes those spaces more accessible for quite a lot of disabled people, even if you don't have the extra width for power chairs and so forth. There are individual cubicle bathrooms in public places with male and female on the two doors that can have those labels taken off and replaced with the word toilet.
What about if you want to do Class A drugs?
Yeah, well, I think my solution works better for that too, doesn't it?
Sure, with a friend. Okay, do we have any questions from the audience?
I'm going to be a tosser and tell an anecdote, but it is a bathroom anecdote from today. That I'm non-binary, but I tend to go to the women's bathroom because problematic. I feel in that bathroom, I could statistically take more of the people in a fight if it came to it. But this is the guilty... You can buzz me for that, Rube. This is the guilty feminist. I went to the men's bathroom today because I was like, I know the cubicles are quite near the door. There's not going to be a queue.
The queue thing is an issue.
I read an interesting article about that in the US, one of the United States parliaments, about how they suddenly had more women senators or something, but they didn't have enough bathrooms. Interesting article. You've read it, you're nodding. And I went into the bathroom, and then I was bleeding. I needed to put something in the bin, and it was the men's bathroom. There was no bin. And then I had to walk past all the urinals like, uh-oh. I got out. I'm here. It's all good. Nothing happened. Bathroom anecdote.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jess.
Can I just say something now that we're talking about bathrooms? You will find actually with women who've experienced FGM, especially type 3 who are totally closed, they take 30 minutes to urinate. And this is an issue a lot of these women have had. So people are knocking on the door, telling them to come out. But it really does take them half an hour to urinate. So now that we're talking about bathrooms, I thought I'd bring that up. Just to set the mood.
Wow. I take longer if I'm reading on my phone. Because you can't pee and read at the same time, so it takes ages.
I've sent a couple of emails.
If you can't pee and read at the same time, don't try and pee and read at the same time.
I know.
I feel like Leyla's thing is a better reason.
Yeah. Oh, sure. I'm not suggesting. I'm not suggesting iPhone privilege.
This Minefield show is a lot more about going to the loo than any of us expected.
Any other questions? Yes, somebody there.
Do you think there's a conflict or a tension that needs to be resolved between making spaces gender accessible or gender non-specific and making them accessible to women or non-binary people who want a private space where they're not seen by men, to adjust some of their clothes, to adjust a scarf? And this is something that's come up in education, sometimes when formerly female-only spaces have been made gender neutral, like women's colleges. It's been a good thing in many ways, but it's made those spaces less of an option for women for whom that's their only space.
So do you mean if someone's wearing a headscarf or a burqa or something like that?
Or I've just totally forgotten the name of the thing Orthodox Jewish ladies wear, but that thing. A sheitel, thank you. Or even not for religious reasons. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if there's a hierarchy or a conflict, and anyone might have an answer to that.
And it's not just for women. I mean, I'm Muslim by name. Whether I practice, that's questionable. But I personally, when I go swimming or to the sauna room in my local leisure centre, I absolutely prefer to go on the days when it's just women. I just prefer it. It's nothing to do with me. I just feel, I don't know, I just feel much safer when I'm around. So I've been worried.
It's cultural, isn't it?
I prefer it.
I was in the Netherlands doing a corporate job over there, and they were all like, "Are you coming to the spa with us afterwards?" And I was like, "No, like come to the sauna with us." And and I was like, I was with Sean Connery and in Amsterdam, it was good times. And I said I would want to wear a bathing suit, and they said, "Oh, English people are always so covered up. It's so hilarious. You would make us feel uncomfortable," and they would say, "You have to take it off. You're making everyone else uncomfortable with your bathing suit." And I was like, "How am I the uncomfortable one? I've got it all covered." And they were like, "Exactly." And what are you doing? Making a statement about our nudity? What is wrong with you? You're so uptight. You're British people.
Conditioning,
and you know.
you're right.
And I was like, it is true, it's conditioning.
No, I actually challenged myself in the next couple of months. At some point, I'm going to go into a space like that where it is mixed. And I'm telling myself there'll be a hot guy in there. Like, that is my motivation.
Is this bathing suits on or off?
I'm going to make sure I have a wax before I go.
So it's bathing suits off,
with.
right? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
and eyebrows done. So there's more work involved, I guess.
This doesn't sound like a feminist challenge at all. It sounds like I'm having
Hence
the
why I'm
works.
here.
I'm waiting till I know that
Guilty,
Dave is
guilty.
there. Then I'm going to go in and be all like, it's a challenge.
That'll be
It's
my
a
next
fem-
I'm a feminist, but...
I joined a naturist club a few years ago.
Do you know you said that out loud?
Yeah. I did. I joined a naturist club in Cambridge. It was along the river, and it was the one bit of river you could swim in Cambridge. And I thought, I fancy a bit of that. The swimming. And so I joined this naturist club, and they were incredibly sweet. And I arrived there, say, "Hello, I'd like to join the club." Middle-aged, cis males with your cocks out. And they were very friendly and very welcoming. There were 3 of them, completely stark naked. And one of them really sweetly said, "Look, we're very liberal here." Are you? "We're very liberal here. You can wear a bathing costume if you like." And it was brilliant. And it was, I don't know why I'm telling this, but it was...
Oh, I do.
Yeah, I just like people to know.
No. It feels so.
But it was so
what that is. So
it was so
on the
normal and so
money.
welcoming, and not apart from for the first 30 seconds of my brain going, "Don't look down, don't look down, don't look down, don't look down." After that, they were so completely cool about it, and cool about me wearing a bathing costume, that you sort of go, "Oh, maybe we are going to be all right." It was lovely.
But in terms of safe space, I think there is room for it, but there's room to change the boundaries of what that means a little bit.
Yeah.
So we need to get away from, so I'm just going to use the example of the evangelical church tradition because I know it the best. We need to get away from like the men have big meaty barbecues and the women bake cakes, and those are our safe spaces. What we more need to be doing is saying, do you need to have a safe conversation about your sex life, and are you a person whose genitals look like this or who has sex in this particular way? And then we have these safe conversations. Do you need to adjust your clothing where you're not going to be overseen by by other people, fine, there's this space over here for you. It's moving away from all of our conditioning being about whether we have an innie or an outie, which I think might be my new catchphrase. I'm gonna join that.
If that changes, when that changes, when the whole conditioning thing stops being so binary and nonsensical, does gender expression therefore change?
In 100 years' time, let's say, I don't know, I'm making this up.
In the future.
Sorry, in the future. Could be 20 years' time, could be 100 years' time.
When
whatever.
Jodie Whittaker's in charge.
She's going to take us to see this exciting future.
Could a child who has so many different role models, so if instead of it's the high notes are women and the low notes are men, if there's this non-binary keyboard, we can all play in all of the spaces up and down. So a child will absolutely have an uncle who wears a dress and an auntie who is a Olympic boxer, and like there's just all sorts
Puts
of
mascara on her top lip hairs.
yes.
It's I'm getting excited about this non-binary future.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
sorry.
So where we all play, we all dress up, we all dress down, we all play here, we all play there. Will a child in that fantasy future go, oh yeah, I'm a bit like Auntie Mary, I'm a little bit like Uncle Vanessa, and I'm a little bit like this, a little bit like that, and so therefore, what genitalia I have is absolutely represented by all of this gender identity and all of this gender expression. I don't need to transition because there's nowhere to go because where I am is great. Do you see that world and that place without in any way undermining the trans experience? Is that a possible world that we could live in for some people?
A lot of trans philosophers would call that post-trans, and I think that's a good thing. It's a little bit like some people talk about being post-feminist, and post-feminist doesn't make sense yet because we still have patriarchy. So in the same way, once we get rid of cis-sexism and transphobia and all the binary bullshit assumptions that come along with that, then we'll be post-trans because there won't be that enforced assigned starting point, so there won't be anything to trans away from.
That's an exciting idea.
I like it. Yes, please.
Questions from the audience on Minefields. There's somebody at the back.
I feel like I may be jumping up and down on that minefield at the moment asking this question. But
Go for it.
Isn't it okay to stand up and fight for the one thing that you fight for? So I, on a daily basis, probably tell people I'm a feminist 10 times. And I've got quite probably a limited definition of that to what that means in my life. But isn't it okay to stand up and say transgender is, your number one thing that you fight for? Or people say Black lives are the number one thing they fight for. And without saying all lives matter, but no, Black lives matter, and that's what they stand for. Isn't it okay to fight for that one thing and fight it well and do your best every day instead of trying to fight every cause?
Okay, so what's the need for the ally, Kate?
It's really interesting because I find ally space quite difficult to occupy, and increasingly I am not sure that I necessarily even have the right to use the term ally because I worry that, sorry.
Fucking hate everything. Language is so difficult. I've learnt tonight, I maybe shouldn't say trans, I maybe shouldn't say... I'm not
say
gonna
trans,
be saying,
say trans.
No, I will, but do you see what I mean, though? People who are so angry on the internet going, you're trans exclusionary, and then the next minute someone goes, well, you're saying the word trans. And I feel like we're all the People's Republic of Judea.
It is that. The big risk with all the minefields is that we end up fighting good people.
Yeah.
And that's what the bad people want. So I would say fight the battle that's important to you, and we all support that.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, yeah, and support other people.
We're not encouraging violence,
I think
but we
that's
keep
what you're
using the word
saying.
fighting.
Yeah.
I mean, the ally thing was kind of a self-crit as well. I don't mind other people using the word. I don't know that I can claim that on behalf of people I'm standing next to. I would really like to be their ally, and I really hope I'm their ally, but I also know that the mines are going to... It's back to what you were saying earlier. If I tread on a mine that is not my mine, it might well hurt somebody else. And then do I have the right to say, oh, but I'm an ally, so I didn't hurt you really? And that's what I worry about with ally language, is that people use it as a shield. And actually, it's not. It doesn't give you the right to say whatever you like. But equally, I spend most of my life talking about queer Christianity. I don't devote much of my headspace, for example, to Black Lives Matter. I will take somebody on if they walk into my office and say all lives matter. It has happened. But it's not my primary thing. And I think, we're a spectrum of feminisms and we all come together to create a whole.
I mean, that was a really good question, actually. And I think you're right from what you said. I mean, all of us, even just looking at this table, we're all fighting one particular battle. I'm known as the girl of the anti-FGM and the vagina cupcakes, and my mother's not very keen on that stuff. But it's one thing I've learned after 15 years of being involved in this work, and I hate even using the word campaign or cause, because we are talking about basic human rights we're fighting for. For me, that's really important, the language that we use. But what I realised through that work, actually, I can't pick and choose what I support and don't support or work on. I think when we are all in these positions, we all play a role. So when I get on stage and I'm invited to come and talk about FGM, I have to talk about all forms of oppression against human beings. And I always say, human rights is not a bloody Pizza Hut buffet where you get to choose, oh, no, I am against FGM, but child marriage, I'm not so sure. You can't really do that. Oh, no, not the LGBT stuff. Oh, please. So for me, it's important to, you can only do what you can do. But it's important when you are on a platform, when you can speak about, because at the end of the day, we are all fighting for the same thing. It's important that we are saying the same sentences. We're all fighting, because I think all of us here are fighting to be okay with just being our own unique individual human beings. That's really our battle at the end of the day.
I am also aware of white feminism, of me going, I'll just work on my thing, which is feminism. But what that can be interpreted as, or what the result of that can be, is let's work so that white women have as much privilege and influence as white men, and then we're done. If I just work on my patch is a pretty privileged patch, and I already get quite a lot of airtime and influence. So I feel with my influence, what I need to do is kind of shine a light and go, well, if I'm not giving any airtime to people who are non-binary, or people who are trans, or people who are people of colour, or people who are queer, if I'm not allying up, if I'm not saying I want to include, I actively want to include, and I don't know how I do it so that I don't upset anyone, or I would just say, well, I am going to upset people, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Actually, what I learned from working on this, you have to outrage people. You will piss people off in order to make change, and we have to be okay with it.
There was a hand up there. Yeah.
I had a question for Leyla. I can imagine in your work one minefield you have to continually deal with is the name FGM, which has spurred many acronyms like FGC, FG.
Oh God,
Q. That just seems to be going on, and I was wondering how you navigate that minefield in your daily work.
For me, actually, in terms of terminology, it's been a bit of a journey. And actually, one of the things I've done as a therapist was it was one campaigner who really insisted, Leyla, stop calling it FGM. And I said, when you actually check what happens to these, you can Google it, you will see it's not cutting or circumcision, what actually happens to these women. So that we can all be clear about. But obviously, I cannot tell a survivor or what she should call it. So that's really important as well. So what I've done in my clinic at the moment, it's one of the questions that we've added during the assessment, is to ask every woman, which terminology do you want to use? And it's been really interesting, quite interesting terminology. One of them calls it butchering, because who am I to tell her what's happened to her? One of them calls it genital genocide, because she goes, that's what happened to us, because, this is genocide against women. I've come to the conclusion now, and I was having this conversation this morning, actually. I'm filming for this documentary at the moment, and I said, I actually want to get rid of that term. Because for me, this is about violence of children, because it happened to us as children. This happened to me as a 7-year-old, where I was grabbed, pinned to a table, my legs were spread apart, and my genitals were touched, and it was cut. So for me, and actually it was a police officer 2 weeks ago who I saw at this conference in Birmingham, he said, Miss Hussein, because I never heard of FGM, but if I walked into a room and I saw that and I had to report this on a child, he goes, I wouldn't use the word FGM, I would have used serious sexual assault. And that's really what happened to us. And I think these words are constantly thrown in there to kind of make it separate. It's not separate, because if that happened to a blonde, blue-eyed girl, it would have been reported as sexual assault. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, and this is the minefield I'm in most of the time with politicians who don't even call it FD, they call it FMG most of the time. And I'm like, oh God, we've got a long way to go. So I'm like, let's just get rid of it. Let's call it for what it is. It's a serious sexual assault against children.
One more question.
I don't doubt that everyone here wants to be much more inclusive about the way we speak and the way we kind of interact with people from other groups. But how do we go about making it in the mainstream when political correctness as a term is cast about as something that's very negative and something to be ignored?
I'll take that.
You
Okay.
should just buzz just for that.
Political correctness, there's a very interesting history of that term. I imagine you probably know about it too, that it originated very much as a word to use for political language that you didn't like and that you thought was being imposed. Did anyone else notice the free speech bus that was going around America with stuff about boys are boys and girls are girls and that's it, or something? That wasn't about free speech, was it? That was about saying that trans people aren't real. And I think there is a risk with some of these issues that the difference between what it is right morally to say or who it is right morally to give a platform to, particularly on a specific topic, it's not the same thing as saying we should legislate against it. And I think freedom of speech is very specifically about government interference. But as a community of activists, we, I think, have a job to make sure that our discourse is as productive and as positive and as inclusive as possible. And that means you can work on your own thing, but don't say all women have vaginas. And if you say it by accident, say, whoops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. And that's okay. You know, we do fuck up. That is normal human life. And I mean, in comedy as well, that often, and especially portrayals of trans women in comedy, have traditionally been that being a trans woman was an inherently funny phenomenon. To be honest, I mean, there's a lot to laugh about me, but that's not what's funny. My social skills are quite funny sometimes. So I think political correctness is a really handy red herring, and at the moment it's in the hands, as it were, of a very right-wing agenda to say that it's political correctness to say that, you know, murdering people is bad. I don't think that's true, and I don't think that it's morally neutral that Deborah chose the guests, or chooses the guests that she chooses for these events. I think it's morally positive because it's about giving a platform to ideas that need to be heard and to a discourse that's going to be productive and hopefully make humanity better off. On the flip side of that, when a university, for instance, invites, I don't know, a speaker, we don't need to name names, there's too many names, who has a track record of advocating violence against a certain group of people, do you know, maybe that's not morally neutral either. Maybe that's morally wrong, and maybe we should campaign against it. Even though we don't think it should be illegal, we still think it shouldn't be done.
The amount of times I had to back off from panels because they invited somebody who thought FGM was okay. Because you wouldn't invite somebody who thought rape was okay. And they don't realise, oh no, we need to hear from both sides. And I go, well, let me do something for your genital and let's see if that's okay. And let's have that conversation then. You know, that, I mean, it's really, seriously, I mean, that always happens. It's this idea of, you know, let's hear on both sides of the story.
Yeah. And can I give a quote from Desmond Tutu? Because I love Desmond Tutu. He said, hang on. To be morally neutral in situations of oppression is to take the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on a mouse's tail, the mouse will not thank you for your neutrality.
Thank you very much. Leyla, do you have anything to plug?
The clinic that I founded, the Dahlia Project, we currently are going to be looking for some funding. So if you just Google Dahlia Project, FGM.
How do you spell it?
DAHLIA Project.
Dahlia Project.
Dahlia Project, and type FGM, because there are a couple of ones, so just type FGM, and there's a donation button. We'll be really, this is the only counselling service in Europe for FGM survivors.
Anti-FGM?
For FGM survivors.
Oh
this is the
my
only
God.
counselling service that we go to.
Listen, this podcast is free every single week. Now, I understand you people in the room have paid for a ticket, but everyone who's listening at home who hasn't paid for a ticket, can you please put the price of one ticket into the Dahlia Project? How much did you pay to come tonight? £12.50. And I understand some people cannot afford that, so please don't feel pressured. But if you can afford £12.50 and you can't come to a Guilty Feminist show and you're listening at home, could you please give it to the Dahlia Project?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
If you can't afford £12.50, you can afford £10, £5, £2.50, please give it. Can someone stand at the door? And anyone who wants to put in tonight for the Dahlia Project, we'll give that to Leyla. Reubs Walsh.
You can follow me on Twitter. It's Reubs JW. I'm also beginning to do some sort of practical neuroscience for feminism videos on YouTube, so trying to think about how we can have conversations that use the knowledge from neuroscience of understanding how people think and how people have conversations to help us to better have those conversations, both in this space, but also then when we go out and we face people who we really, really don't like or who we are trying very hard to like.
Carrie?
We're all one. Be excellent to each other. Have compassion. Be as present as you possibly can. And you'll be golden with all the faiths that are good in the world.
And how can we follow you, a great one?
You really don't have to. Just find your own way.
That's her Twitter handle. She is at You Really Don't Have To Find Your Own Way. Follow her now. And Kate, what can we do for you? Can we come to your church? Can we get an amen?
You can, but I feel like that would be kind of self-serving. But you can. I sometimes preach at Northern Lights Metropolitan Community Church in Newcastle upon Tyne, and they're lovely, even or especially when I'm not there, depending on how much you've enjoyed this. You can find more about MCC, my church, at mccchurch.org, and we are global, and we do have all sorts of outreach into countries where it is really, really difficult to be queer at the moment. And particularly, you could look up the Global Justice Institute, which does really good work supporting queer people who are unsafe around the world.
At
Kate_Elizabeth.
At Kate_Elizabeth, and I'm at Deborah FW. If you could go to Global Pillage at globalpillage.net and download some episodes and listen to my diversity-based comedy panel show, which is the antidote to all the panel shows you see on the telly that are full of white men, straight white men without any other diversity, who also are great. Listen, some of my favourite husbands are straight white men, but I'm just saying it's nice to include others. So please go there, download it, and check it out.
Follow The Guilty Feminist on Twitter at GuiltFemPod. Check out our Instagram, instagram.com/The Guilty Feminist. Like our Facebook page, please. Sign up to our mailing list to get notified as soon as a new episode is released. And go to iTunes and rate, review, and subscribe 5 stars, because it helps other people to find the podcast.
You have been listening to The Guilty Feminist with me, Deborah Frances-White, guest co-host Carrie Quinlan, and our very special guests, Reubs J Walsh, Rev Kate Harford, and Leyla Hussein. The recording engineer was Chris Sharp. Music was by Mark Hodge. The producer was Tom Zielinski for The Spontaneity Shop. Thanks to Zoe, Meta, Sally, and everyone at King's Place, as well as all of you for listening. For more information about this and other episodes, visit guiltyfeminist.com. Tom has a phallic-shaped microphone, which also could represent a vagina.
I'll wear it on my head later, guys.
Interestingly, he also has a microphone-shaped phallus.
This episode's way funnier than I thought it was going to be. Who would like to ask a question? There must be loads.
Hi, I'm Sophie Hagen. You may know me from such things as co-hosting episode 1 to 29 of The Guilty Feminist. I'm just here to let you know that I'm on tour of the UK and Denmark with my brand new stand-up show Dead Baby Frog, which is about emotional abuse. My whole tour is anxiety safe, it has gender-neutral toilets and disabled access all around. Go to sophiehagen.com to find out what I mean by that, to find out where I'll be and to get tickets. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, and why not listen to my new project, the Made of Human podcast. Bye!